All right, we have with us Casey Hardman. Casey, thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here.
So we were just doing a little bit of a preamble before kind of introducing myself. And, I want to thank you once again for coming onto the show and having that trust in me as an interviewer to help explore the story that you've written, 13 years in foster care. So
Yeah,
thank you.
absolutely. It's a pleasure, and it's certainly a relief off me to be able to talk about it and to share my experiences and hopefully reach others who've been through similar situations.
Well, and in reading the book too, I was like, whoa, the writing itself is so incredibly vulnerable, so like it's deep, in the sense of it's like unabridged, unfiltered, it's raw. This is who I am, this is my story. And I imagine like when a person writes, there's this idea of like there's the catharsis of them getting it out, right? But then there's this added piece of putting it out to the world. Did you know when you first started writing this that you wanted to put it out to the public?
In some ways, yes, but
Yeah.
in others, I really started just because I was at a point in my life where I needed to work on healing myself from everything I'd been through, and so I didn't know how to kind of get help, but I knew I wasn't a big fan of therapy, although I've had experiences with it and I knew it did have some benefits. But for me personally, I feel as though finding a way from myself, through myself, to kind of work through everything was going to be my best way of actually helping and going through these emotions and trying to just figure things out. And so I wanted to write them down and kind of work through them. And it was a long, long process, but I definitely had hoped to be able to share. I didn't know if I was going to be able to, but at least even for my sister, just to kind of share that my experiences with her, to maybe try and help her because she was going through a lot at that time as well. So a bit of both.
So when I was reading in the book, and it sounds like you started writing this as the documents of you in foster care were sort of released to you. Is that correct?
No, so the book was actually written over just over 10 years time. So I started planning and prepping, getting kind of information tidbits from my biological family when I was 16. So once I was released from care, and then when I was 18, I started actually writing, so jotting some things down. So it kind of goes all over within the next 10 years or so. But I really got down after I got my case files, which took about 9 years to get. And so I was able to kind of go back and just kind of vamp things up to incorporate and include specifics, so like the times and the dates, and just for the accuracies, and
Right.
just to kind of be like, oh well, this was included because it was in my case file, even though my memory is this. So it was kind of an inclusion of both.
Now, and for listeners, I think it might be kind of good to bring this up. They probably know because they're smarter than myself, but I wasn't aware of what gaslighting was. Like I'd heard that, and essentially, it's when somebody, innocently enough, is trying to coerce somebody into rethinking what has happened. So doubting what the person is telling them, essentially, is my understanding of gaslighting. Is that is that a good definition? Would you say?
No, I think that's good. Yeah, like, and
Okay.
I totally get what you're saying. Yeah.
So when you're reading and where I'm going with this is you're reading these case files, and then you have your memories. Now you didn't have the case files before, and as you're kind of formulating things, did it sort of make you double think your memories, or did it kind of did it bring it into clarity when you had the notes?
Yeah, it didn't really change my memory. I think if anything, it elevated my memory. So it just included things that I wouldn't know. Because obviously you can't live in somebody else's mind, so you don't know exactly what they think or what they're feeling. And the I think the real problem for me though, because I did have like certain specific files just because they're included when you're growing up in the foster system, and so you get these little meetings every so often. But a lot of it wasn't, it was just in the voice of the adult, right? So they're giving their opinion on how, what they see, what they, and while being a child having these issues, you're trying to convey them to the adults, but they don't maybe necessarily listen. And so in while reading the case files, I'm able to see specifically what they're saying. And it's you can really kind of tell, okay, they're really not listening to me even back then. They, because they're just kind of avoiding everything and just, saying, okay, well, I'm the adult. I know what's what. You're just the child. So kind of just sit back and this is how we're going to go about things. So it just elevated, I think, more than anything.
Well, you bring up a very good point. When I was doing my undergrad, we talked about childism, which we hear of racism. It's to be prejudiced towards someone's color of their skin. But there's also childism when, because we're an adult, we think we have a power advantage over a kid, that what they're saying isn't valid, right? It's a form of prejudice.
Yeah.
And it sounds like in your book, you talk a lot about that, right? Because you're smiling, right? You mentioned in the case notes, oh, he's a happy kid, he's smiling, that they associate that with he's fine, but you weren't fine.
Right, and a lot of that too. Well, just to go back, it's I've actually never heard somebody use the childism before, so that's gonna be something I'm gonna keep in mind. But yeah, so in regards to the smiling, I was always told to smile, and it was something I
Mm,
touched base on because it seemed as though seeing a child happy, seeing a child smile was the most important thing, whether and regardless of the fact that you're actually giving this child a reason to smile. So just by saying, I want you to smile, that doesn't mean, I have to or I should, because why should I smile? What are you doing to help me form that smile that's not just forced, right? Just for the vision of, okay, well, we have a happy child, so we're good.
right. And how that translates into our into our adult lives, right? All these learned things, now you're 29,
31.
31. You're as
30.
old as me. There you go.
Okay.
We're young, we're just starting out. But anyways,
Yes.
so these things, like, I've had to really unlearn a lot of the behaviors that I had as a kid. And I imagine that you've had to go through that same process.
Yeah, and it was really difficult too, because with each move that I make, you're in a different home, so you're with different people with different views, different opinions.
Right.
This is acceptable, but that's not acceptable, and then it could be reversed somewhere else, and so you're always constantly having to change, and it's in some ways it's a forced change just because you're trying to adjust into a new setting and it's not easy, and so it's just so much. And then as you grow, you're trying to adapt and figure out, okay, well, maybe if I can take this bit from here and this bit from here,
Mm,
I'm gonna create my own little version from kind of various homes, and it's just confusing, I guess.
yeah. Well, that lack of consistency,
Yeah.
right? Because, well, now in my reading, so like I said, I'm in chapter 4, I believe, and it's you've gone back to your mom. You've gone back
Okay.
with your mom, and then she again says, like, I can't do this, and so you're preparing to go to another home, but they're also interviewing you and your sister, and they're having this conversation uh, in front of you with your sister about something very serious that's
Yeah.
going on between her and your father. um, and I guess just it's how many different homes Because I'm not at the end of it. How many different foster homes did you go to?
So within my 13 years in throughout the system, I kind of go through various stages. So there's different forms, I guess, of the children's aid. So the foster system. So you have your adoption agency through it as well, and so I actually go through all of those agencies and systems. But so within the 13 years, including an adoption that ended up failing, there was 10 permanent long-term homes with approximately 9 relief and short-term. And so usually, for the most part, it was about one long-term per year, and depending on the foster home itself, every so often you'd be sent to a relief stay somewhere for the weekend to kind of give a break to the foster parents, and so then you have that additional kind of home within a home.
Right. Now, growing up, I mean, I can't imagine the feelings that you were going through, except for obviously in what you write, of your feelings of like, worthiness and significance and all that. Was there ever somebody, and there's one that I'm going to bring up, but was there ever an adult in your life who really stood out and was like, this person truly has my best interest?
Yes. So there's a few, and for a few different reasons. So for me, dealing with so many people, one thing I always wish I had more of, but one thing when I did have it, really appreciated was the consistency of the people. Um, so there was this one woman through the system who at various times would see and interact with, and I refer to her as the supervisor. So one thing you'll notice in my book is the only name that's ever mentioned is my own. So I kind of try to give little nicknames to homes and to people. And so she's referred to as the supervisor, but she was one consistent person who just always made me feel good. She was always excited to see me. And so it was always a positive interaction, and even allowed me that safe feeling to want to communicate. So certain feelings or issues that I was having, I'd be like, well, I can write to her, or I can try and call her and talk to her. So she was definitely one. And then one of my social workers when I was around 11. So I also write about her, and that was before I ended up going to a group home. And so she was another really positive influence on my life, and somebody I didn't always appreciate, but certainly did later on, just because of
Right.
the lessons that I was taught from her.
Are you still in communication with those two people?
With the supervisor woman, I am currently, and she's been really supportive, and she was one of the first people I wanted to share my book with once it came out, because I've been talking to her over the years, and she was really helpful with trying to get my case files, and
Mm.
and so I definitely wanted to share that with her, and so yeah.
What was that like when you shared that with her? Like, how did she respond?
Oh, she was just so thrilled and so proud, and she had always been such a light in my life, and so knowing how much I struggled, because she was there basically from the beginning, so she understood all that pain, and there was a lot that she didn't even realize, just because she wasn't the direct contact for me, but she certainly knew of various things, and so it definitely helped her to see certain areas within the system that could be maybe corrected or adjusted to ensure a better upbringing for others in the system currently.
And oh man, like that's such a great point, because I work as a counselor within the public school system, and parts of me are like, oh man, am I creating the changes that I want the world to see? Right? Because it's very the work that you're doing, for it to be effective, it's very small, right? Like it's
Right.
individual based. I'm working with you and I'm working with this person, but I can't work with everybody. I'm just one person.
Yeah.
And that's actually very frustrating for me. So because it's like I want to be as maximum service, maximum help, but I can't. It's not exactly possible. That's why I kind of started doing this, because I'm like, hey, maybe that's a better way to broadcast myself. What advice do you have to people that work with at-risk youth, that can make them better suited to be there for that individual?
Oh, that's tough one because
Yeah.
there's so many things, but I think even for somebody like myself in the opposite end of the situation, being the one who needs the help from somebody, is one thing that I guess could be really beneficial would be to not focus so much on everyone and trying to help everyone, or it would be start with just one person, and even by writing my book, even if I could touch just one person's life and make a difference in some way to just one person, then that's more than I could ask for. So you start one at a time, and it's unfortunate that you can't always be there for everyone, but try to do as much as you can. And after a while, especially by helping people one at a time, you can find ways or think of alternatives where it's like, ooh, let's do some form of group setting, so you help more people, and then you kind of branch out from there. And it unfortunate, it's a learning curve, but I think it's a beneficial learning curve in
Mm.
a way. So
And and the unfortunate thing is that you mentioned this social worker that really helped you out, right?
yeah,
Case worker.
yeah,
So not all social workers are of the same quality. I'm sure you've experienced
yeah.
it, right?
Oh, for sure.
And that's the other problem. I mean, I think what what my benefit as a a counselor, a school counselor, is that I try to avoid the sort of like the moral, like you need to be a good man when you grow up, that kind of BS. It's more just that I'm present and I'm there with the kid, and it's like, let's play chess and I'll beat them, but then I'll let them win, But my point is that it's presence. And I think
Yeah.
that a lot of that kind of human connection, that human capacity for relationship is not always there these days.
No, and it's incredibly important too. You got to find, and especially when you're dealing with so many people like social workers, counselors, if you have the opportunity where you're working one-on-one with somebody, you almost have to do a revised, okay, well, this person is better suited in this situation. They require this and that, and so you got to kind of have to change things up a little. And where from my experience, I've had some workers where it's, oh, the child's alive, they have clothes on their back.
Mm.
I'm sure they're fed because, especially me, oh, he's a little porky, so I'm sure he's eating. So, you know what? I did my job, kind of wash the hands, right? And the thing that for me, which really stood out for my favorite worker, was how she would try and go that extra mile to
Mm.
really sit down. And there'd be the small things like our little car rides, or we would have fun conversations about things that I like and maybe things that she likes. And so it was just that connection, that additional little connection, which makes all the difference.
Well, and I think that, and I wasn't rolling my eyes at you, but it was this idea of like, oh, he's fed, he has clothes, and he's smiling. He's fine, right? And that's such a like a check, check, check on the next kid.
Yeah.
But there is that emotional nourishment that everybody needs. I don't care what age you are. I'm talking to a 97-year-old person after this interview, and he's in a home, and it's like there's another huge case that's being overlooked, is that people, we are societal creatures, and we function best when we have that network, that connection, that's that emotional social nourishment. And you had a lot of that with your sister. Now I haven't got to that part yet, but were you I think you mentioned that you guys were separated at times, is that correct?
Yes. So for most of our life, actually, we were separated. And one thing you'll notice as you go on in the book, because she was the only constant familial bond that I've had in my life, and so I wanted to honor that in some way. And just because I'm not just sharing my story, I'm sharing our story, her story, a little bit from my perspective. And so what I did was I tried to take her out of my story, my journey, and kind of do a combined piece. So
Mm,
chapter 14 in my book is you'll notice it kind of goes back all the way to the beginning up until the end of chapter 13. So it's definitely more. You'll see a lot more her there, but yeah, for a long time we were separated from 6 years old, and we didn't end up living together until I moved back with my biological mother, and that to keep her in my life, it almost seemed like a fight and a struggle in its own, because that visitation was so infrequent, and didn't happen as much as it probably should have. And it was also used as a punishment for
mm.
misbehaving. And that was really difficult too. And so you would go months at a time without even talking on the phone, because you swore at your teacher when you're having a bad day. And so it was definitely a rocky journey for the two of us, as a family. So
And your sister is she a year older than you? I think you mentioned.
yeah, so she's 11 months older.
Right.
Yeah.
And but today, you're 31, she's 32. How are I 32, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So how is your connection now with you and your sister?
We we're still in talking and in each other's lives. Over the years we've had our fallouts and our disagreements, some bigger than
Siblings
others,
do.
but it we always find our way back to each other.
Mhm.
And I think that's really important, because well, at least for me, I don't talk to any other family, and she's the only one that I kind of wanted to stay in touch with, mostly just because I know, regardless of how many issues I had and struggles I had to deal with, she had so many more. And she ended up aging out of the foster system, so she had stayed in quite a lot longer after I left. And so I knew that there was a lot more that she had to deal with, and I didn't want to be another person to let her down. And so I always kind of gave her that extra break in a way, just because I knew she felt as though she didn't really have people on her side, and I didn't want to be another one of them.
And again, my experiences are different than yours, but there's sort of with your sister, you guys had similar experiences, or at least you had each other to sort of that kind of camaraderie through these, these adverse experiences that you guys had throughout your lives, right?
Yep.
And my connection to that is that, after my dad passed, the counselor wanted to see me and was like, "Hey, I heard your dad's dead." And it's like, yeah, he is. And he was like, "Oh, well, would you like to talk about it?" And it's like, "No, I'm fine." Again, checking those boxes. Never heard from that person ever again. But
Jeez.
it's like, you don't understand what I'm going through. How can I open up to you? And I think that that's what's missing in this sort of, again, this interesting power balance is, first of all, nobody wants to be helped when they feel like they're being pitied,
Yeah.
right?
It's about how you approach it as well. Like, had for instance, the counselor had reached you a different way and approached you from a different perspective that maybe was more compassionate.
Mhm.
And like, it's just all about how you approach certain situations, and especially really traumatic events in a person's life. You're going to want to take that extra step to allow them a chance to connect, to be like, what, yeah, okay, I can share. That's, I can open up a bit. And
and and I think too that the people in the system that work, nobody starts getting into social work or counseling or something because they're like, I want to make $1 million. I mean, maybe they do, but the, I'm an idealist. I believe that people get into it because they want to help heal. They want to help make the world a better place. So often they kind of bring in their own baggage that they kind of got to deal with too, but that's neither here nor there. My point is that I think there's a lot of fatigue in the system workers. And while I didn't get it, that connection from the counselor, and no knocks against that individual. I mean, they were just doing their job. And again, compassion, fatigue. But I found it in a teacher. And man, he made all the difference. So, having that person, we all need that person in our corner, and I think that, that's what helps us not just survive, but thrive. In your writing, in your book, what was the, again, because it's so raw and it's so like honest, what was the hardest part for you to write about, would you say, other than obviously the whole thing, but what was like a particular moment that you're like, oh my God, I'm struggling with this?
I think for me, the most difficult section would have to be everything to do with my adoption. The process prior to being adopted was, really difficult. I was 7 years old, and it was a super rushed, procedure, I guess you could say. So everything just seemed to kind of, there was no time to kind of step back. And so stepping back into that time and into those memories, it brought up a lot. I had to say goodbye to my biological family, something I didn't really know about or knew what that meant. And then the proceedings of adoption. And I know when I was doing what they called the life book sessions, which were kind of a look back on your life up until that point,
Wow.
I had a letter, like just a 1-page letter from my mother. And but I couldn't read or write, so I kind of had to work on that with my caseworker, and it took 3 sessions just to read that letter, because I couldn't stop crying because of all the emotion. And I included it in my book. But then that just added into the adoption, right? Because there's all these issues prior that don't get worked out, and so then you have that escape of, ooh, I'm happy again because I have a new family, but you haven't worked on any of the previous issues and the loss of a biological family and the understanding surrounding all of that. And then when you add in bullying and, I had some issues with my brother towards the end of my adoption. And so I talk about that, and that just kind of played into the whole creating new issues and more trauma and more, so that also didn't help. And so it was, all of it combined, I think, was very difficult, but it was freeing as well, because I, for so long, wanted to come to terms with losing such an amazing placement for so many reasons that could have been helped had things been different. But it was, like I said, it was freeing, I think, to relive that and to write about it and talk about it. So,
Well, the the catharsis of going into these things that, like, nobody wants to, comfort is, we choose comfort for a reason. It's easy. But discomfort, going into the cave that we fear to enter, could hold the treasure that we seek to find, that old saying. But we have to do that very scary, dangerous work of, facing ourselves and our own demons. And we talk about the sort of the cycle of poverty, of abuse, and all these things. And the fact remains that hurt people. And as I'm reading the story of your parents, I can't help but think, whatever happened when they were children, again, not to make it about them,
yeah.
but that's how these things can carry on, right? And my own father, who passed away, he really struggled with, his own things. And as a consequence, I struggled with, substances when I was in my 20s. Am I having fun or am I escaping?
Yeah.
Right. I was escaping. Anyways, in your experiences, did you struggle with substances, or were you able to, through your writing, kind of avoid the pitfalls that your parents went through?
Oh, I definitely struggled. I definitely, wanted to heal, I guess you could say, in a way. I was first introduced to, substances, and when I was 12, and so I started, light, like not a lot, just a little bit, and it was more so just to kind of escape everything that was going on. And so as I got older, I think my sister fell into that kind of way of life a lot more, and that kind of acted as like it gave me something to see what could become of me had I gone down that way, down that road, and it wasn't what I wanted. I'd worked so long and so hard to kind of get out of trouble, to find a place. And it's unfortunate because through her downfalls, I saw a way to kind of come out of it. I still obviously wanted to help her and be there for her, just because she needed to figure out to work through her issues on her own. Um, just because I think that would help her a lot more, but it's difficult because you so badly want to be there right in the center and be like, no, don't do that because that's not going to work. But, in a lot of ways, she needed to find that out. And so I used that to be like, okay, I can, smoke a joint or whatever at school here or there. But as long as I know the difference between what's just recreational once in a blue moon and then where it can become an issue. And so after a while, I was just doing everything I could to just completely stay away, just so I don't have to be put in that kind of situation.
Well, and oh man, you made a really good point about, you can't rescue your sister, especially if you yourself need saving. And I call this the superhero syndrome. Sometimes our most favorite heroes are our most broken individuals, like Batman.
Yeah.
Like he's going around beating the piss out of Joker, but he's like, I'm such a failure. You know what I mean? He has to go through his own thing. And if we want to save the world, we really have to start with saving ourselves and
Yeah.
being that example. And my friend, like that's what you're encapsulating in this work is I want to heal myself. And this is my evidence of it,
Right.
and,
Yeah.
and that's what I believe you have achieved. And you're just getting started.
Oh, I'm totally getting started. And, and the way
It's
I heal.
exciting.
Oh, it's totally
Yeah.
exciting. And, the more I heal myself, the better position I can be to be there for people like my sister, or be there for other kids who are going through it, where, you offer a little bit of advice. Doesn't mean they have to take it. I certainly didn't take any advice when I was growing up either,
Yeah.
but it's those things that really stick in your mind, and whether somebody listens and adjusts their current actions at that time, it doesn't mean they won't kind of go back to those pieces of advice later.
That is, oh, yeah, man, you're bringing me into it. You know what I mean? Like my own experiences. And you're so right. It's, you could take the horse to water, but
Can't make a drink.
that's an individual. You know what I mean? You can't like waterboard them because you'll drown them.
Yeah.
And that's the reality. And in our culture, Brene Brown talks about it. Gabor Mate talks about it. Shame is not an educator, but that's what we use. Shame.
Yeah.
Like the other day, I have problems with anger, and and I think it's just because I'm such a compulsive individual. But anyways, so I was driving and I was up at 5 a.m. My kid woke me up, who I love, at like 3. So I'm already like lack of sleep. I forget my mask because I'm going to go to the gym. And as I'm driving, I'm like, shut. And then I'm like, oh, I got mad. And it's like, hold on, let's just take a step back here for a sec. I am an animal. I'm functioning on 3 hours of sleep. I'm trying to better myself by going to the gym. That's something I don't want to do because it's uncomfortable. And I forget my mask, which is like, oh my God. And then no wonder I get upset. But in our culture, it's like, why did you get upset? What's wrong with you? And that doesn't work for anybody.
No,
That just further pushes them into, like, why are you such a drunk? It's like, do you really think that's going to get a person to stop drinking,
no,
talking to them like that?
it's
Right.
definitely not.
So I imagine in your life, you've had to overcome a lot of these shaming sort of techniques that are based out of, this the good intentions of making a person better, but it doesn't work. So how did you kind of overcome the shame that people threw at you in your life?
It took a long time, I can tell you
Mm.
that, and I think it's just try to find alternatives, so for me, for instance, quite often I'd be told, don't talk back to,
Mm.
the adults, or don't talk back to the teacher, right? And so trying to it was with each problem, it was about trying to find a solution for it, and it didn't always happen right away. So for me, in certain instances, it would be, okay, I'm going to try and refrain from speaking back, but I'll roll my eyes, because hey, I'm not talking back, I'm not cursing, I'm not
Mhm.
swearing, but you're going to get an eye roll. So it's
Yeah.
either the eye roll or the talk back. And so over time, I think, and even today, I'm still quite the eye roller. I'll just, it's just easier, like, okay. But
Yeah, yeah.
but then you
It's
can,
involuntary.
yeah, it's involved. Oh, it happens so often. I'm surprised my eyes aren't in the back of my head. But you then you can kind of slowly work at that, where you can have a bit more control. So you do it piece by piece until you're able to be like, I can take a deep breath and just calm down and kind of check myself. I'm not speaking back. I'm not cursing. I'm not eye rolling, even, where I can just be like, okay, and just kind of find the calmer maybe solution. It's not easy. It takes a long time. At least it did for me, but
And such a wonderful point of, this calmer method, if you keep your engine from overfilling, right? But going back to my example, I got 1 2 3 4 5, I snap. Well, no wonder, right? The glass was overfilling.
piles up.
Exactly. So that self-care piece of what works for you, to that daily healing, right? And it, from what I picked up from the book, is writing for you is that sort of daily activity that brings you that sort of serenity, or just kind of lowers your glass, so that if somebody says something ignorant, which unfortunately there's an unlimited supply of that,
Oh, you can
you
go anywhere
don't
and get
snap,
it.
right? Yeah, yeah. You just have to leave your house, right?
Yeah,
You don't even have
exactly.
to leave your house, just go on the internet. But
Yeah.
yeah. And I guess so. Sorry, I don't want to take words away from you, but what has been sort of your daily practice to maintain your sort of serenity?
Oh, um, well, one thing I can say is, especially within this last year, with everything going on all over the
Mm.
world, from, racism, from a pandemic, it just makes you really call into question, the people you have in your life and the things that you do on a daily basis. So I actually stopped talking to so many people, because I was like, you know what? Like, especially from things that you think you need to post on social media. No, you don't. First off, that's not a way to talk to people.
Mhm.
Don't need to bring them down. So I don't need that in my life. I've had enough people trying to bring me down. The last thing I want to do is try and bring somebody else down for, something that doesn't matter. And so, you know erasing those kind of negative people really help. And so it's just about finding those instances within your daily routine and your activities. Okay, well, what can I make things better? And for your instance, I'm sure you probably thought, what, maybe I should just leave a mask in my car. So at least that's one thing I don't have
Yeah.
to worry about. That's one less thing that can kind of ruin my day or make me feel
Mhm.
upset. And, so it's just about finding those small pieces. And, I have my writing. So I do a little bit here or there, have my coffee, my quiet time where I can just kind of contemplate and kind of just relax. I can put music on and just have my Zen moment. But of course, with a puppy, that the constant barking and attention, that doesn't always help, but it's a nice distraction as well.
And that companionship as well with the dog, right?
For
I mean,
sure. Yeah.
because dogs don't roll their eyes at us.
No. Although mine will, I think mine picks up
You've
on that.
trained it,
Oh,
trained her.
he has so much attitude. It's just like a little mini me if I was a puppy.
Funny how that happens. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, for me, what's really helped is, and maybe you've seen it because yeah, I get very easily excited, but it's the deep breathing, and people, they sometimes go, when I go, they're like, is everything all right? I'm like, well, yeah, because I'm doing this. That's why
Yeah.
everything's all right, and those things that we can do right away, because not everybody, including yourself and myself, we can't just pull our notepad out, start writing. We got those easy, quick things that we can access. And
Yeah.
for me, it's been breathing, you know. And it sounds like for you, you sort of have this. If I allow time for myself, that can allow me to recharge.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing that a really interesting point in your book was the second time you bit somebody, the mother talked to you and asked you what had happened. And I think that was such a change in terms of like, what the hell's wrong with you, Casey? Like you're biting people. It was like, okay, tell me why
Yeah.
you did this. And you did. And she didn't backhand you after. She spoke to her daughter. And then there were never problems after that, from what I was understanding in that chapter.
Okay, so yeah, that I so the chapter what you're referring to, it was that incidence was slightly different. So there was
Right.
altercations with two individuals during my time of being adopted, and so one I was this male bully that I had, and he the only thing I had, like my only way of defending myself was to bite. I wasn't strong. He was older, he was bigger, and I was on the bus. And so anyways, and I kind of snapped and bit him and made him bleed. And so my adopted mother, and her husband, my adopted father, they both spoke to me because it was obviously a concern. And so we talked about it, but it was one of the first times where the way they went about handling that kind of situation was new, but it was very appreciative because they wanted to get right down to the root of the issues and to try and work things out. And with another female bully, you know, with everything that happened with her, we ended up going to her house, speaking with her mother, and there was apologies that were done. And to not just avoid and say, okay, well, we'll deal with consequences, but we'll not actually get to the situation. And so we were able to kind of work on that together. And it was something I didn't experience either. And but it was definitely something that was to be appreciated.
Because the reason I bring that up is, as a parent, um, I mean, I can't even, words would betray how much I love my kid. And if something ever happened to her, it's like my first instinct is like, well, what did the other person do? The reality is my kid is not a saint. Like I watch her and she's got some she takes after her dad. I'll just say that much. But the fact that this adult who wasn't, you weren't their kid, they listened to you.
Mhm.
And I just think that that's so empowering as parents. And I feel like that strategy or that tactic or whatever you want to call it is not so often used anymore. And it's to the deficit of our children, this sort of exceptionalism of our children, you know, how are we teaching them to become better citizens if we're not, you know, not disciplining them when we need to? And I don't mean discipline as in like, but having a conversation and understanding the why. Because when we do that, we will make stronger people, you know. Inclusivity, being inclusive, being compassionate, it makes us better. You know what I mean? It's not just like, you know, oh, the world's flowers and all that stuff. Truly, when we are compassionate, we become better humans.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. And I guess I'm just looking at the time here too. Now, the movie Shawshank Redemption, you know, it's a film. And have you seen it?
I seen it like years ago, so
Okay.
you know, I don't know it you know, piece by piece, but
You
yes.
you don't need to see it to understand this point, but he
Okay.
goes to prison. He's wrongfully in prison, and he gets out, and it's raining, and he's like, ah. My point
Well,
is
that's the one that he went through the tunnel through.
yes,
Okay. Okay.
yeah, literally through, you know,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, literally he went through mud and human mud. And anyways,
Yeah.
so he gets out, and it's raining. My point is that that's such a wonderful illustration for life, and we toil and we go through these moments, but there are moments of like just absolute clarity. And we see films and we're like, okay, that's great that they fit that into 2.5 hours. And but we do have those moments in life. I've had those moments. What was a moment in your life when you had that sort of moment of clarity? You know, all this pain that you experienced, all these adverse situations, did you have a moment when you're like, you know, there's this clarity, there's this understanding, there's peace?
I think for me, the biggest clarity. So I'm actually writing the second part to my book only because I thought it would be important to share what happens potentially with a child once they leave the system. You know, especially after
Mm,
spending their life in there. You know, it's always the wonder. Well, okay, well, they're back with their parents, or, you know, we found an adoption for them, so let's, you know, I'm sure everything's going to be great, but that's not always the case. And so I wanted to kind of touch base on what the possibility is of a child leaving the system. And so at the beginning of my second part, was after I was returned to my mother, and that moment of just the door kind of hitting my worker on the way out, you know, like, well, not actually hitting him, but once it closed, once he left, you know, right there, it was like an instant release. It was just, it was an incredible feeling. And, you know, I had started to feel that on the drive out, you know, because I was so determined to make this arrangement work, moving back in with her. And I knew it was going to be trial and error, but I was so determined. And so I was starting to get that bit of clarity. But once he left, it was just so many things kind of clicked for me. And it was just, my mind had completely opened and changed. And, you know, it was just an amazing feeling.
it was, would you say it was kind of the completion of missing parts of this story? Like it was like, whoosh,
Oh, a total full
yeah.
circle kind of moment, you know, and you spend so long dreaming and hoping and
Mm,
praying and everything, and then finally you're there, you're up on the, you know, the top of the hill,
right.
you know, and it doesn't always happen where it's perfect, and it certainly didn't become perfect for me, but in that moment, you know, there was no worry, there was no stress, you know, I could, you know, exhale, and all the
Mm.
pain and trauma and everything for that moment was just gone. And that feeling is something that I'll always remember no matter what I go through. And it's just something I constantly go back to remind myself.
I know of people quite close to me who, you know, they've been adopted, and they haven't met their biological parents yet, and it causes them such grief. Or some of them who have met their parents, and it was like, it just kind of was like they slumped from it. It wasn't what they had expected, and it disappointed them, and I don't want to take words from them, but that's kind of what I've picked up from what they've told me.
Yeah.
What advice do you have to anybody who has been, they've never met their parents, they've been adopted, and they're in this kind of purgatorial state of, who am I? Like, what advice do you have to listeners such
Um,
as yourself?
well, for myself, I mean, obviously everybody's going to have their own
Of
opinion.
course.
And, I've met various people over the course of my time in the system and even afterwards who've been in those situations. In my book, I write about what was best for me.
Right.
And so, somebody else can kind of go with that, use it as reference. But it's a difficult thing because I don't think there's ever a right or wrong. It's kind of a mix. Is it better to not know anything about where you come from and just live in the moment, especially if you have a happy home? Or is it going to be more beneficial to have some knowledge as to why you were adopted? But I think it's going to be, you kind of need to really weigh the pros and cons. What's going to be most important for you? What's going to mean the most to you in going forward? Is it going to change your perspective of the adoptive parents that you're with? And, so you got to keep asking yourself these questions and trying to figure out what is best. And maybe by the end of the whole process, which you don't need to make right away, it doesn't need to be an instant thing. You can take some time. Um, but ask yourself and come to terms with, do I need that information in order to live my best life?
Right. Right.
But it's definitely a tricky thing.
Yeah.
I think for me, going into my adoption at the age I was, I knew certain aspects of my biological family, but there was still so much that I didn't. But then I was also carrying the pain and trauma of the issues and violence and abuse and all that. And, so that just kind of weighed on it. But there was always that curiosity that I couldn't shake about, well, who are they and what exactly happened? And I wasn't able to figure that out then, and think about, okay, well, do I need to know this in order to be happy? Because I'm with a family who's really loving and really caring. So should I be holding on to that instead? And it's a definite trial and error, which is unfortunate, but I don't think there's any real right or wrong answer.
I think too that, I mean, on my dad's side of the family, and if they're listening, I love you guys, but their idea of like being a Grant, because my last name is Grant, is very like, this is who you are, like it's in your DNA. And I imagine as someone who didn't know their parents, there's that nurture nature piece of, who am I? Like, do I do these things because, I have no control over it? And I think that, I'll kind of speak for myself. There's a bit of a scientific fallacy going on there in terms of the biology of, well, I'm just this way because of my parents. And maybe, yes, maybe that's the reaction, but most anything can be unchanged, right? Of course, situations of the brain, I can only speak for myself.
Yeah.
I can only speak for myself, but I know my tendencies, for example, the anger or the substance choices or whatever, that it's not exactly empowering if I say I'm like this just because of that. I have power in myself to sort of tap into that and make my situation better and not just be a victim to the world, right? Again, I'll speak for myself. I can't speak for anybody else. And that's what I picked up from your work is it's very much about, this is my process and owning it, that ownership. This is my life. Kind of last question for you, because I realize we're running out of time.
Oh, of course.
And this always happens. But you mentioned that a very difficult part for you was writing about when you were 7 years old and going through the adoption process. For me, it was when I was 15. And if I could go back in time and speak to my 15-year-old self, because truthfully, man, I was very hopeless. And it's a very scary place to be, to feel hopeless. if I could go back in time and speak to myself, I often wonder, what I'd say. And this isn't about me, but if you could go back in time to your 7-year-old self, I imagine that was a period where you felt a little bit hopeless, uncertain, right? Again, I imagine, I don't know.
Yeah.
But what would you say to yourself now that you're 31 years old, you've written a book, what would you say to yourself?
That's actually really difficult. Uh, I think there's a part towards the end of my book that I kind of touch base on what I'm saying about to say, but looking back, I almost am grateful, as weird as it sounds, of having to deal with those struggles. Obviously, I would prefer not to have dealt with any of them. I think it would certainly make life easier, but the way I see it, life isn't easy. And by learning, especially looking back at everything, and especially around that time, it gave me a sense of different aspects of people and about life, and just so many life lessons that I never would have fully understood. And I think going through those situations is empowering. And it's not only for myself, but those, I keep in my life. It's something that I can share with them, and help others in some ways, whether it be to share my experiences and things that may have helped me or didn't help me, and if they choose that, they can go that route as well. But yeah, I don't know if I would say anything to really change, because I don't think I would want to,
Right.
just because like, obviously it was really crappy time and I definitely was not happy then, but looking back now, it's something that I can actually feel proud of. It's, here I am, 31, don't no criminal record, no substance abuse issues. I actually graduated high school, which was not something that a lot of people in my family had done. And it was just little things, and so it was just something to be proud of, that I was able to kind of make something of myself because of those struggles and because of those tough situations.
And for, kind of to talk about what I was thinking too, is that moment of clarity that I had, it was because I made peace with my inner child.
Yeah.
And I guess that's sort of my question is, had you, it sounds like you have made peace with your inner
Oh,
child.
I definitely made peace. I've
Yeah.
it took a long time, but yeah, I've definitely made peace with all of it, and having to relive it and talk about it. It's easier each time you do it, and you're at the point where you're content with how things have gone and have things have become for you. And so, yeah, definitely at peace.
Yeah. And then it's going to be okay. Like, that's what I would say to
Yeah.
my 15-year-old son. It's going to be all right.
Yeah. Just hang in there.
Yeah. So Casey, thank you so much. So your book, 13 Years in Foster Care, it was released December 10th, 2020. Tell us where we can get that.
Yeah, so it's 13 Years Fostered, subtitled.
Excuse me, fostered. Yeah.
Yeah, a young man's struggle for life, and you can basically get it anywhere. Amazon offers really fast delivery, obviously. If you're in Calgary, chapters, most chapters actually have it in store, so you can do that, or Owl's Nest Books. But pretty much anywhere online, if you're an online shopper, just Google it and have at it.
Now, is there an audiobook version available?
No, there isn't.
Okay.
It might be something, I've been asked that quite a few times. It wasn't, in all honesty, wasn't something I'd even considered or thought of. And then I was thinking to myself, I'm already self-conscious about my voice. So how do I probably
You
wouldn't
have a
want
wonderful
mine.
voice. You have a wonderful voice. Yeah.
And but then it's so many things. But I think I'll wait a little bit and see how things go. And it's always something I can kind of go down that path later. But for now, I think the print.
Wonderful. Yes. Yeah. Well, like I said, thank you so much.
And thank you so much for having me. This was awesome.
Oh, honestly, my privilege. Thank you.
Perfect.